Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are heading up to Sacramento, the capital of California. We're going to talk broadcast journalism, local news journalism, and we're then going to talk about what it's like to pivot in life when you still are underneath the communications umbrella, but then you decide to do something totally different, and that is be a media consultant for law enforcement. Our guest is Stefanie Cruz. We went to college together at the same time, early 90s, mid 90s. She lives in Sacramento now. She advanced her career from Yuma, Arizona to Davenport, Iowa to West Hartford, Connecticut to Sacramento. Welcome to the Where You At podcast, Stefanie.
Thank you for having me. And it's so good to reconnect since, yes, we did go to school together when the earth cooled. My kids like to say in the 1900s.
Yeah, this is the first time Stefanie and I are talking over Zoom, and this is the first time I'm pretty sure that we've seen each other since we were walking the PSFA building hallways back when the journalism department was over that way. It's on a much different part of campus now. But Stefanie, I'm excited about reconnecting with you and sharing your story. Some of my favorite stories for these podcasts are people who did one thing within communications or journalism, and then they decided to do something else. And I think it's really good for our students to be able to learn why someone got into something, why they left. And also there's two different types of career paths that we can learn about from you. So let's just start with San Diego State. Why did you go to San Diego State, and why was journalism the career that you wanted at first?
I knew that I wanted to be a reporter, TV news reporter, anchor since I was 5 years old. Back then, I don't know if you did this. My parents would sit around and watch the 6 o'clock news. We'd have dinner. It's part of the routine. And I felt like the anchors were communicating directly at me as a 5-year-old. They're speaking to me. They're telling me a story. I want to do that. And I grew up in the Bay Area and just actually wanted to get away from home, like as far away from my family as possible, just teen angst, the whole thing. And San Diego is a beautiful city. And it ended up being a great choice at the end of the day, because you've got these smaller markets like Palm Springs, Yuma, Fresno is nearby. So there were a lot of starter markets nearby.
I can definitely relate to that. I grew up in the Bay Area. We watched the 10 o'clock news, my dad and I, and then we'd usually watch the KTVU 10 o'clock news and then usually the 11 o'clock news again before going to bed. Did you have like an anchor or reporters who you watched and you just kind of like emulated or wanted to emulate that really had an impact on you? I
love Dave McElhatton, Wendy Psakuta, Joel Bartlett, and Wayne Walker. They were the dream team. I mean, other kids were like playing Barbies. I'm like, I love these guys. They're awesome.
So you were a CBS family.
Yes. They did feel like family. I mean, you felt comfortable, like people you could have over your home. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I can relate to going to San Diego State as well, because I felt like it was the furthest place away from home that was still in-state tuition. And San Diego, America's finest city for a reason. So once you get to San Diego State, tell us about your time studying journalism. Who were some of the peers or the professors or the classes that really had a pivotal role in your development?
Joe Spivak. Do you remember him?
Mm-hmm, of course.
Now he was, at the time, I thought, this old man, he was pretty tough. But I loved his stories about when he started working in news, and they had these giant plates, right? And that's how they printed newspaper. And he was a stickler for grammar. And that has stuck with me. I mean, I can spot misspellings and grammar mistakes now because he was just a lunatic about it in a great way. And then there was Tim Wolfmeyer. Is he still around?
I don't think either one of them are still around, or they're definitely not part of the department.
Yeah, he was great. He just had a great sense of humor. And they all took it seriously, right? And really tried to talk about the responsibility and just community service aspect of journalism. I liked that.
When you speak of Joe Spivak, Okay, so
Yeah.
I was at the Daily Aztec and we did not have a faculty advisor. We really had, it was just the kids running the asylum. And we thought we were so good and we thought that we were so smart. And we never asked Professor Spivak to do this, but he would come in with the Daily Aztec and the red ink that would be all over that paper, it was just blood all over the entire paper of all of the grammar mistakes and all of the all of his feedback, which I hated because it was a bruise to the ego. But then once I got over that, I would look and I would just think, we have to be better. We can be better and we will be better. And I'm glad that he cared enough that he did this. Again, we didn't ask him, but he just took that red ink and just destroyed each day's newspaper.
And I remember that about you. You were the editor-in-chief and you were demanding, but I don't know, I thrived off of that. And I do miss that about I guess old school journalism is that now I'm really aging myself here. That sort of thing mattered, right? Just the nuts and bolts of it, whether it's grammar, spelling, punctuation, even in broadcast, no one sees it, but it matters. It really does matter.
I remember in college thinking in terms of like what stories I want to put in the Daily Aztec. So I was the sports guy who got put as editor in chief, and I was super self-conscious about, okay, I need to make sure that I'm not just, filtering sports stories to A1 as often as possible. But I remember thinking, we're a student newspaper and we're writing about students. And so we should have stories that students care about. And I remember thinking, if there's a whole lot of potholes, we should be writing about that. We should not be shying away from these stories that don't seem like they're super hard-hitting journalism. And I'm wondering for you, when you were first kind of getting the idea of what a story is and what I want to put as a reporter or as an anchor, what you used as motivation for what you wanted to cover, both college and then as you progressed throughout your career.
Well, these days, the first thing I always ask myself is, why would anyone care, right? Like, why does my next door neighbor care? Mm-hmm. And so I ask this as I'm training law enforcement to identify what are stories that people can relate to and how can they humanize what they do. I'm like, what do people care about? What are they going to talk about at the end of the day? What's sort of that water cooler story? And that is always applied back then and now.
So what students right now really care about is, how do I get a job? So help me, Stefanie. How do I get a job if someone wants to work in local news? Look, I know the industry has changed, but what were some of the things that you did to get the first job in Yuma, to advance to Davenport, Iowa? What were some of your strategies and that students can learn from now about how to get those jobs?
I think some things remain the same. You have to be very persistent. I dubbed 300 VHS tapes and sent them out.
300?
300. I got them at the Dollar Tree or the dollar store, right? Uh-huh. So I'd have 2 TVs and I dubbed my resume tape over, and I got 2 responses. One was somewhere in Mississippi and one was Billings, Montana. And then I was ghosted after that. So it took a while. And I think the number one thing is that you have to believe in, what you want to do and why you want to do it. Why do you want to go into journalism? And lots of times people think there's a lot of glory and fame and money that comes along with it. And it can be true. It can be true, but that's not the reason you want to get into it, because there are a lot of tough times in between. There are a lot of holidays. My first job in Yuma, Arizona, I made $15,000. So I was $370 some odd every 2 weeks. I wasn't in it at the time for the money, certainly. You could make more money working at a restaurant, waitressing, and I had a degree at the time. But I think just being persistent and constantly asking yourself why you want to do that and getting better at your craft in the meantime. And the industry has changed tremendously. And it used to be that local news, TV news, was sort of the end all, right? But I look at it now like, you should get into it to build your brand, because people aren't watching, not consuming TV news the way they used to, nor are they looking at newspaper. When was the last time you went to light rail and saw someone holding a newspaper? It just doesn't happen anymore. So it's a great place to, I think, learn how to make your mistakes, and then build your brand. But also I would think beyond that. I never did. I don't know about you, but I was always like, I'm going to retire in TV news and that's how it's going to be. But the world has changed that you can actually create your own channels, your own platforms, and have your own voice and be your own boss. And at the end of the day, I think that's what it's about. controlling your own narrative.
When it came to advancing from one market to the next, was there a time frame that you had in mind, and did you get an agent? And at what point does someone who's working in local news need to get an agent?
My time frame was get the hell out as soon as possible.
Okay.
A year. I'd say I was in Yuma a year and a half, and I felt like I was like, I did a long time here. I did prison time. And then Davenport was a year, Hartford 4 years, 5 years. Usually one contract cycle.
Mm-hmm.
The mid-size markets. The smaller markets, I was trying to make it a year and a half. Although I don't think that's what the model looks like anymore. It used to be you'd come to Sacramento after 8 years experience. That's what I did. Now I'm seeing a lot of younger people coming in. So there's more opportunity for people to start in a mid-size, larger market. And so that's good. That's opened up in that way. And there are a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah. What about getting an agent? I hear students ask that all the time. People ask that of me as a minor league baseball broadcaster. Well, do you have an agent? Do you need an agent? What's your opinion on that?
I don't think you need one right away going out of college, right? You can send out your own resumes. And quite frankly, I cold called Yuma, Arizona. And I said, I need 300 seconds of your time. I'll drive over there and I'd like to meet with you, and you're going to hire me. I don't know what came over me, but that's honestly what I did. I just was really persistent and focused on getting that one yes versus a 299 no's. But I think that as you advance, probably mid-size market to, market 30, that's when you'd want an agent, because then you're looking at things beyond your pay and length of contract. But also, there are other things that matter. The time off that you get. The outs that you want in your contract, that's going to matter then.
Let's talk more about getting that first job at Yuma then. Okay, so I love the confidence, and sometimes desperation leads to that level of confidence when you've sent out 300 VHS tapes. So you called them, and then did you indeed drive and show up in person, or what came next to get that first job?
I did. I showed up in Yuma. I said, I'll be there on Wednesday or whatever day it was. And I waited for the news director, and he was great. He gave me my first break. And he said, okay, fine, Cruz, you start in 2 weeks. I'll give you $15,000, figure out a place to live. And I don't have a car for you yet. So you're going to have to drive your own car. And that's how it was. And that was great. I remember just being broke. The whole experience was terrific. Looking back at the time, it wasn't funny, but what a great time to be out there and just cut your teeth and learn to write and meet people. And if you really, really love the profession, love journalism for what it is great because you get carte blanche to go out and meet people, go to council meetings, chat with folks. I'd show up every morning at 7 a.m. I'd do my beat checks, and then I would visit police stations and say, hi, do we have dead people today or anything going on? and that was fun. That was a ton of fun.
When it comes to putting together a story, there's the writing, there's the stand-up, there's the B-roll. When you showed up, did your mind think B-roll? Did it think sound? What did you think? Take us through when you show up someplace and you say, okay, there is a story. What am I getting, and in what order am I getting this?
I always thought about what is my first shot of the package, the story, right? Mm-hmm. Because I've got to open with something strong. And so I always was looking at that video. Someone told me once that, and writing is huge, even in broadcast news, that, and I may get it right. It was something along the lines of, you could have crappy video, but good writing will hold it together. You could have great video, but bad writing will not hold it together. And so I always stayed really focused on writing tight. And that's still, I think, something that even at our age, I have not mastered yet. I'm still getting better at writing all the time. Do you feel that way?
Writing's a craft. And I think that the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
Also, the more you do it, the easier it is to get to fall into the same traps of writing the same type of style or the same type of cliches, or just using the same phrases. You know, as someone who speaks live roughly 3 hours a game, I think about how many different ways can I describe a ground ball to the shortstop, right? In live times. So there's times that I sit there and I practice. And I think of 20 different ways that I can describe a ground out to the shortstop. And I don't think anyone notices other than me, but I know that I get bored with myself if I describe a ground out to the shortstop the same way. And so I literally practice. Sometimes in the middle of the day, sometimes I'm in the car when I'm bored. Sometimes if I can't fall asleep, then I'll lay there in bed and I'll think of, okay, that's 20 different ways that I can describe a fly ball to the center fielder. What's 20 different ways that I can describe, a stolen base, and then there's a throwing error and the guy runs to third and then he tries to score and he gets thrown out at home. I practice these wacky plays because I'm a lunatic, but I think that if you really care about what you do, whether it's minor league baseball play-by-play announcing or whether you're working in local news, you think of different ways to write and say things so that when it does become showtime, you can deliver that.
No, for sure. I don't think you ever fully arrive, at least not with this craft. If you are doing it right, you never fully arrive. So when I'm training people who think they know everything, I'm like, yeah, we've got a long way to go. The first thing you need to know is you don't know everything.
Mm-hmm. So you spent some time as an anchor as well. So give us kind of the pros and cons of what you liked about field reporting, what you liked about anchoring, and what you didn't like about those two, so that students can kind of learn about the differences in those two skills.
Field anchoring is great, a great foundation if you want to anchor at some point. I wouldn't look at anchoring as, the brass ring because you have the TV on you all the time. I think that it is a privilege because you get to look at an entire newscast and you get to be a managing editor for not just the show, but really for the entire station's image and what their goals are, and really carry those out. As a reporter, it was fun. You got to be out there, meet people, press the flesh every single day. But as I got older and had kids, I wanted a more normal schedule. So I knew that I'd be home at a certain time, or I could maybe have a dinner break and meet my kids. And that's a tough transition because I felt in some ways that I'd taken a step back, that I wasn't out reporting, and I always wanted to be a reporter. But then it's just looking at it differently. The reporters put the mic down and they're done with that story for the day. Well, as an anchor, I'm worried about what happens at the end of the newscast. I'm worried about what happens at the beginning, the teases that are written, everything that comes in between, how much time I'm giving a certain story. And I would look at anchoring as that sort of privilege, as being a leader in your newsroom and not just on this pretty face that's on television. So that was fun. And that, I think, sort of changed as my lifestyle changed and my kids grew up and I wanted to be just more present.
Speaking of your kids, was there ever a time that they're like, Mom's on TV, and they're just kind of smiling and they're watching and and they're watching the local news the way that you did as a kid and say, Mom's on TV?
I think when they were little, but I'll be really honest, it's not a flex anymore because kids their age do not watch TV news. And I asked them the other day, I'm like, so if something big's happening, you want to learn about this hurricane that's coming up, the coast, you going to turn on the TV? They're like, no, absolutely not. We just go on Twitter. We just go on our phones. So they don't relate to that at all. They know that I worked in TV and I'm like, that's cool, I guess. But they're like TikTok stars out there, Josh. They're TikTok stars.
Yes. Tell me about reading from a teleprompter. What was your learning curve so that your eyes are not doing this, so that you're in tune with whoever's operating the teleprompter? Give us some advice about working with a teleprompter.
It took me years. I'd say 10 years to be able to read a prompter properly.
Really?
Well, because I was kind of going for, at the time, so when we were growing up, it used to be the announcer voice of God kind of deal on TV. And then things evolved where I was trained to speak more conversationally. Yes, you want to be authoritative, you want to sound a certain way, but you also want to sound a little more approachable and more conversational. And so reading copy like that is difficult. At least I found it to be difficult. And so I would edit a lot of the copy so that it sounded like me. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's what I would do, is go in and write it so it sounded like something I would say. But I think it takes a long time and just years and life experience to figure out what your voice is in anything, really. But that applies to that as well. But I wouldn't look at it so much. I tried not to look at it so much as I'm reading the prompter as I am using it for guidelines, because I try to remember ideas. And sometimes I wouldn't follow actually what was written.
What about when it comes to just locking in on the camera, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have this as humans, you make eye contact with someone, you don't want to creep them out. And so you look away, or you're trying to think about something. And so you kind of look away, and that helps you focus on trying to remember something. Especially when you're in the field and you're doing some live shot, it's your job to look into the camera and deliver the story. But sometimes you get self-conscious when you start to stare too much longer into a camera. What were some of your tips, your secrets for being able to do this correctly?
First of all, I never memorized anything out in the field. Everything was 2 or 3 bullet points. And I enjoyed just trying to remember that and then talk around it. Makes you a better public speaker. But I think it's important to take those natural breaks. Like I'm looking away right now. I'm not looking at you the entire time. I try to treat the camera as another human being. And we do. We break eye contact. We look away. I might use my hands. And so I try to visualize another person versus a machine in front of me. And that's what you want to do, because those are natural things that we do. Is we don't stare at people and talk at them and talk directly at them. We look away.
All right. So let's transition to you leaving television. When did you know, and why did you know that it was time to leave television news and do something else with your life?
It was sort of this confluence of probably entering my 40s, the industry changing a little bit, and then my kids also reaching a point where I was the evening anchor at the Fox station here in Sacramento and had been for 6 years. And I remember my last year on the job, and it wasn't the TV station. It wasn't, it's just the way things were going, I think, in the industry. I remember I'd get these press releases from the police department. It'd be like, okay, so the mugshot, and then the narrative, I'd write it and do a VO, whatever the crime was, a stabbing, a robbery, on and on. I remember every night writing it and thinking, I don't know if I want to do this for another 15 years of my life and write about, Joe Blow, who just robbed a 7-Eleven. And there were a number of things in the industry that changed because you and I grew up when NPPA style mattered, lighting mattered, a lot of that stuff. And this is not to say that it's any less storytelling today. It's just different because there's so many different sources for news and information that, you've got a lot of younger reporters turning a lot of stuff, a lot of newscasts. And that's when I started to feel like maybe this isn't the right thing for me anymore. But that was scary because your entire life, you're like, this is all I know how to do. What am I going to do with my life? I got to do something, right? So things sort of naturally ended in news, and that was a hard transition. But I also wanted to not be in a newsroom at 11 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. So it was time. It's like, so now what do I do? I this is the only thing I know how to do. That's it. I can talk into this camera and I can write and I can chat with people. And that was, that's a tough thing to face, to be honest. So I hope that, as I said, TV is not the end all. And I hope people look at that and say that there are a number of things you can do. Tons of things. I know a lot of professionals who've moved on. They have their own companies now. They have the freedom. They don't have a boss. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
So where do you start? Did this job with, law enforcement, did they approach you? Did you see something on LinkedIn or on some jobs board and you thought, you know what, maybe I could do that? Like, how did this come together?
I work with 5 other former TV news reporters and anchors. And so one of them I used to work with at the CBS station here in town. And she left, was disillusioned by local TV news, and decided, you know what, I really have a passion for helping other people tell stories. And one area, you look at 2020, what happened with law enforcement, George Floyd, the defund movement. And I'm not getting political about it, but they certainly had a long way to come when it came to communications, transparency, and really telling their story. And people who don't do what we do are afraid of the media. They're afraid of getting in front of a camera. They're afraid of expressing themselves. And so we saw that, just that vacuum there. We're like, you know what? And I've always been pro law enforcement. And I think that the vast majority of these law enforcement officers, they do a good job. And one thing I don't want to see is, and I'm glad I don't work in local news anymore, is I feel like there's a tendency to create this sort of black and white, good versus bad. And I think it's more complicated than that. So anyway, I connected with these reporters. We kind of chopped around and talked about this idea of, how do we consult and help people take our skill set and train other professionals in other industries to communicate and deal with the news media. And it's great. As you still have these moments of where you get your news high, because there's a lot that happens, whether it's officer involved shootings, use of force, whatever it is. And it's forward facing that working in law enforcement, you're working directly with the public. So you're still getting that, but, and you're still writing, but not working in a newsroom under those constraints.
So in what ways do you consult? Like, is it on a daily basis? Do you come in and give a presentation to help them out on a weekly basis? What are the different ways that you help them connect better and describe what they're doing better?
So each agency will have a public information officer. And usually it's somebody who's sworn, a lieutenant, or somebody who does not have any journalism, communications background whatsoever. So I'll come in and we kind of assess what their needs are from social media, top to bottom, internal communications, external communications, maybe some of the agencies, what their mission is, and look at that and write a communications strategy covering all of that. And so I'll come in and do training on social media. I'll do trainings on camera interviews or writing. It runs the gamut.
When you first start with them, do you find that the audience is receptive? Do you feel like you have to win them over? Where on the scale do you find that they are excited or rolling their eyes that you're there?
Both. Cops are a tough group. So a lot of it's trust, right? They don't trust you right away and it takes a minute. But I think especially since 2020 and the unrest and a protest and what have you, they're grateful to have somebody come in and sort of talk them through. Talk them through a lot of this because there's a lot of scrutiny right now, and understandably when it comes to law enforcement, and they have to be able to communicate that. When I first started in news, I would go to the El Centro Police Department and ask for an interview, and they'd say no comment, and that was fine because back then I could just stand there and say, well, they had no comment today. That doesn't fly. So we advocate that they set the narrative, that they tell their own story. You can't do a no comment. That doesn't work anymore because guess what? The reporter will find that story or find, I always say like some homeless guy who's willing to say something or somebody who doesn't know. And you have to give them information.
I've watched some press conferences over the years with some police officer, and you can tell that they're just not comfortable at this press conference, right? It's not what they do for a living. That's not what they're trained. How much do you train them to try to help them so that they don't look so stiff and so that they deliver this information to the public vis-a-vis the media in a way that's not so awkward?
We will go through scenario training, a lot of it. And before a news conference, write a lot of talking points, sit down, go through it. We'll even take a camera and put it in front of them and go through it for hours. Depending on, if the stakes are high, right? Kind of a news conference it is. But the main message is the news media is not the enemy, right? They're a partner in all of this. We all want to communicate directly to the public. We all, they're all about public safety. So let's not look at the news media as the enemy here. But let's be smart about it too, about how we communicate, what we communicate. When we're out there. One of the things I just wrote was a cheat sheet for patrol officers. And one of the things that a lot of them don't know is that in the state of California, the news media has access to natural disaster areas. So if there's a wildfire and you want to get in, they cannot prevent you from that. Lots of times they'll say, you can't go. Well, that's not, it's little things like that. And how do you deal with a reporter out in the scene? Are you going to be a jerk to them? No, you're not. You're going to say, look, I've got a public information officer. And I'm like, ask them when their deadline is very important. And realize they have a job, you have a job. And that's the bottom line.
What are the parts of the job that you find most satisfying when you can smile and you can say, hey, I did this thing and it helped out people? Wow. What are the things that are most gratifying?
Well, most civilians don't understand, especially the process of like de-escalation. When there is some sort of a confrontation, people go, why didn't they just shoot him in the leg? Or why didn't they do this or do that? And when we can take body-worn camera video and put together a story and really take apart what happens in some sort of a critical incident like that and help the public understand that a lot of these decisions are made in a split second, right? They're human. These are humans who are also trying to discern what is happening on the fly. And so when we can communicate that and help communities and law enforcement bridge just understanding or communicate better, that's when I feel like I've done something positive.
One of the parts about being a journalist is always thinking about other ideas and other different stories. Before I forget, I want to go back to something that you did. There was a famous whale that ended up in, you tell the story. There was a book that you ended up writing. So tell us the story about this whale and this children's story that you ended up doing.
Well, back in the 80s, there was a whale, Humphrey, that swam into the San Francisco Bay and was lost for a few weeks. And a news anchor I grew up watching and loved, Wendy DeCuda, wrote a book about it. And it just so happened in 2007, we had a mother whale and a calf swim up the Sacramento River. It was about 90 miles. And they were stuck, and people came out by the hundreds to watch them. And the Coast Guard was out. It was just this really incredible event that was positive, and communities getting together. And I thought, well, I love the parallel here between this mother and baby that, just stayed together the whole time, and their human friends helped them back to the ocean. And so I ended up writing a story about it. At the time, my son was 3 years old, and we went to go watch them. The rescuers try and guide them back out to the ocean.
Tell us about the process of the book.
That was very different. I think broadcast writing helps, but so much of a children's book is dependent on the illustrations. So it was finding the right illustrator, and the illustrator that the publisher hired was the muralist from the Sacramento Zoo. So she was incredible. She did a great job. And in that case, I think that it really was her illustrations that told the story. They were incredible. But in terms of writing, you're not writing a very long, if you're looking at it, what is it, 1,000 words, maybe 2,000 words, if that. But there are a lot of edits that go into it because you're trying to leave out information, right? One of the tough things, and people don't realize about writing, is paring it down so that it's simple, so that it's succinct. That's one of those things I'm like, okay, do we really need to know all of this? No, we'll take that out. And so that was part of that process.
I feel like there's this phrase, it's called owning a story, right? Where whether you're the first at this story or whether you're the best at this story, and then where you just kind of own it. And I think that taking a story like this and turning it into a book, even if it's not about the actual mother and kid whale, but just taking a story and, we're kind of like, it livens you up, it gets inside you and you say, there's something else I need to do with this. And I think those are the stories that are just really fun. When, you're just like, I'm going to take ownership of this, or I'm just going to see like where this story can continue to lead me. And I'm wondering if, there was a story like that for you, or just maybe your advice to students on seizing that story when it really resonates with you.
I think those can be career changing and life changing. So when you have those opportunities, I wouldn't dismiss it. Sometimes I think people are myopic, or they have the tunnel vision when it comes to their careers, right? And I did for a long time, where I'm like, I'm going to go from this market to that market to this market. And I think that if you really, it could be for, a student out there, it could be a blog, it could be a podcast, what you're doing, right? I certainly wouldn't be way too focused on the day-to-day stuff that you're overlooking these amazing opportunities to tell stories, whether it's writing elsewhere, for publications, or helping people with speech writing. I would just really look at all of the different ways you can apply your skill set to not just traditional journalism, but just the many ways you can help people with communications. And I think in the long run, that will serve you well, because as I found out over the last 30 years, we don't stick with one career. And even if you work really hard and you're really amazing at something, life happens and layoffs happen. And sometimes, especially in television, there are a lot of things that are not within your control, whether it's you get a new news director, or the news director wants a certain look, or whatever it is. So it's really important to be prepared and to seize those opportunities when they come up.
There's an expression that we use in AAA baseball, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts, and I'll continue to talk about it from time to time. And the expression is be where your feet are, right? When you're at AAA, you're one step away from the major leagues, which means that you are one step away from being extremely wealthy and perhaps having generational wealth. but you're also one step away from having someone from AA come up to AAA and take your job, and you get released. And there can be this, we call it the shuttle, where you go back and forth between the major leagues and the minor leagues. You keep getting shuttled back and forth, and you can't quite stick because the major leagues is really hard and it's really competitive. And so we say, be where your feet are, in terms of just embrace where you are that day, embrace that assignment, whether that assignment is playing shortstop or whether that assignment is going out to cover this story about a whale, about just be where your feet are and just focus on that moment, and advancing another market, 2 years from now to get to market number 32, or getting called up to the major leagues. It's out of your control. So just be where your feet are.
I love it. That is perfect. And I feel like that's taken, on about you, years for me to get to that point where I'm like, you know what? This is okay. Because you're just on that trajectory where you're like, I need to get here, 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 and the other. And honestly, I'm just trying to enjoy every moment right now.
Well, speaking of enjoying moments, let's finish with this. And that is, you never know what else you're going to end up doing with your life. And so you go from TV to consulting for cops, and now miniature golf.
I know. It's just out there, isn't it? I know. It does not. I asked my husband, I'm like, is that related? He's like, it's absolutely not related. And he was a reporter. That's how we met many years ago. I will say that it's probably the most exciting thing that I've ever done, because I am not a business person. But, as journalists, we're a mile wide and inch deep. So there isn't anything we can't figure out. If I don't know it, I'm going to get the answer to it. One of the things that I like to do is I'll just show up places like West Sacramento City Hall. So there's miniature golf places going in West Sacramento, across from Raley Field. And showed up on the third floor of the planning department. I'm like, can someone explain to me just the permitting process and tell me about zoning? And they were surprised, but they sat down, opened up the blueprints, and like, okay, let's talk about this area. And I think that you can apply a lot of what you do as a journalist. I mean, you can do anything. I really believe you can do anything. If you have a passion for connecting with people, and really that was sort of the genesis of this, is like, we need something to do here that isn't Chuck E. Cheese, that isn't a bar necessarily, but sort of this hybrid, so that you can have kids come in, but you don't want to have that sort of amusement park feel like a Scandia, and then still have a place for adults to hang out and have drinks. And so, I think that, again, it's back to like either serving the community, making those connections. That's what we do as journalists, right? You sit there and you're constantly trying to make connections with people and really serve your community. And that applies in so many different ways. So while it may not seem like they relate, there's certain things that I really need help with. And I do have advisors and a consultant that I work with, because I'm just not that great at numbers, go figure. So they will help with that. But it's all the other stuff, just the curiosity. If you're curious about stuff, there isn't anything you can't do. I really believe that.
When does your miniature golf course open?
Early next year.
Early next year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, there's definitely going to be journalism/communication skills in terms of public relations and how you get the word out, and press releases and the marketing of it and the social media strategy of it and the layout of it. Laying out a golf course, not all that different than laying out a 30-minute newscast.
Exactly.
Actually, it's totally different, but
but I get where you're. No, it's definitely, and I think that's what it's hard to look 20 years down the road, but I just would not box yourself into thinking I'm going to have a career that I'm starting at 22, that I will at 52. It's okay and it's actually great. It's exhilarating when it doesn't go that way. And for a long time, I used to question, I'm like, there's nothing else I can do. There's absolutely nothing else I could do. That's wrong. Absolutely. It's actually been very empowering and has given me a lot of confidence to be able to step out of TV news and find that I can do other things.
One of the things we like to do to wrap up each podcast is to brag about somebody else from San Diego State who is doing something, whether that's journalism, any type of communications, whether they're opening up a miniature golf course. So whether you want to focus on one or two, who do you want to brag about from San Diego State, Stefanie?
Do you remember Agassia Michaelian?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So she is a news anchor in the Bay Area. She's been at KTVU for 20 years, at least. And she's still a true believer in TV news. She's still as bubbly as ever and just loving the industry. And I'm really proud of her because we were roommates in Yuma. And actually at State, we did not like each other. It was kind of like that girl thing going on. Stupid. And then she ended up going to the TV station I worked at, Yuma. And I said to the news director, I can't believe you're hiring her. She's going to kill me that I'm saying this. And then we ended up roommates. And she ended up coming to my wedding. And we've taken different paths, but I've always admired her positivity and just her outlook on news. It is always something that she has loved and has, I think, been a true believer about. And it can work out that way if that's what you want.
I'm glad you brought up Garcia. Hopefully she's going to be a guest on the podcast at some point. But when I got to see her somewhat recently, it wasn't that recently, when I wrote my true crime book, here's this guy who's spent his entire life working in sports. And then I wrote a true crime book. It was Murder in Pleasanton. And I'm trying to figure out a way to get publicity for it. And I remember Garcia, and I'm like, all right, KTVU. I used to always watch the 10 o'clock news with my dad. I got, maybe there's a morning show or an afternoon show or something. And sure enough, they had me on to discuss the book, and Garcia was in studio that day. And I don't think that she was the one that was doing the interview. It was somebody else who did the interview because she had some other part of the news. But it was just really cool to see another Aztec in the newsroom on that same day as I was promoting my book. It was super neat.
It is great. And I'm just so happy for her that it worked out exactly the way I think that she envisioned it to work out. And I think that's really difficult, especially as a woman aging in the industry. Okay.
For my alum that I want to brag about, I try to find somebody each week that has something similar to the guest. And so this week's alum that I want to brag about, I'm looking at her LinkedIn to make sure I get the details right. Her name is Barbara Medina, and she also started in local television news. She was a reporter for Univision, San Diego, Telemundo 33. She was an interactive web producer for Univision, San Diego. And then she became a digital producer for KGTV, 10 News. And now she is a media specialist. She works for the San Diego County District Attorney's Office. She's part of the public and media relations team. She generates and produces video and online content. And so it is another former TV news reporter who has ventured off to a separate type of thing still within the industry. Again, her name is Barbara Medina. She works for the San Diego County District Attorney's Office. Shout out to her.
Heck yes. Did she go to school with us, Barbara?
No, she did not go to school with us because we're super old, as your kids like to say. She was there from 2002 through 2007.
Okay. Young person.
She was at San Diego State.
Young person.
Yes. Another Daily Aztec alum, which makes my heart swell with pride as well.
That's awesome.
All right, Stefanie, before we wrap things up, anything else that you want to say to the students just about advice, about the potential that they have and the different avenues that they can go down with their lives and with their careers?
I say just keep an open mind. Do not get locked into an idea of what you think your career should be. And just any writing opportunities, it doesn't have to be broadcast. I always looked for various ways to just get better at my craft. And so if I could freelance here and there, the money too. But that you just be open to that. Always find ways to get better at your craft, even keeping a journal. I love to keep a journal. Please do that. And really take it easy with Chat GPT. I'm going to sound all 49 years old right now. Use it as a guide, but don't plagiarize. That's all.
Journal. I used to journal. I need to get back into journaling. Journaling is this really cool thing. I found a journal from when I traveled around Europe by myself, and it was incredible to see my thoughts from this time. Journal. I will second and third what Stefanie just said. Keep a journal. You don't have to write every day. You don't have to write a ton. It's the start of your memoir, and it's in real time of what you feel. Definitely journal.
Love it.
All right, Stefanie, I appreciate your time. It was great to connect with you and hear about your story. I know the students are definitely going to enjoy this and appreciate this. And don't be a stranger. Next time you're back in San Diego, come to the campus, just walk around the halls, smile, say hello, start meeting people. I'm sure they would love to hear more from you.
Will do. Thank you for having me. It's good connecting with you.
Once again, that is Stefanie Cruz. My name is Josh Suchon. I'm your host. Appreciate your listening, and we will talk to you again next week on the Where You At podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms, in person, or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.